What is up, y'all? Frosty 0232 here today again for another Frosty Features. We have finally pushed beyond our Invaders team, and now we are to the unaffiliated situation. The unaffiliated character now coming to Marvel Strike Force. Just got to Marvel Strike Force for some people. Quicksilver. So, if you haven't been here before, what this is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force. My name is Frosty Osty, and we typically stick to the Marvel 616 canon. Quicksilver's got a few things in different universes, so what I'm going to be talking about now is predominantly the 616 main canon universe situations, and yeah, so let's get started. According to Scopely didn't write anything. So typically what you see here is the character / lore description that Scopely puts up for the characters. They do it for pretty much every character. Up until now, there's only been one character I'm aware of that they skipped, which was Titania. So as we sit here right now, recording date being April 23rd, 2023, there is nothing for Quicksilver except one line. They released a video. In the video, the only thing they say about the lore is this: the origin of his powers are at the hands of the High Evolutionary, which led to him receiving the Mystic trait. In the How to Play Quicksilver gameplay overview 4/21/23. We're going to talk about that, but that's all of the origin that they gave so far for Quicksilver. That's it, is that he had something to do with the High Evolutionary. Who is the High Evolutionary? He's not in Marvel Strike Force, so how do you know? He's not in the show, right? Not in MCU, so how do you know who it is? Well, I got your back. There's our boy, Quicksilver! I usually don't have the title animate, but I just had to. There's your boy Quicksilver. Name, Pietro Django Maximoff. Right? So, namely, people know him as Pietro Maximoff. More recently, we get that kind of Django middle name going, and we'll talk about where that spawns in a minute. First appearance, X-Men number 4, 1964. He's been around a minute. He's been around a while, but still, we love to see it. He is such a fun character. But yes, so from the original run of X-Men, very early introduced, but introduced as a villain. Powers and abilities. He is superhuman, therefore he has superhuman strength. Obviously speed. Obviously reflexes. Namely super speed, right? He's a speedster. He runs fast. That's his entire physiology is mutated to a point where he is optimized for speed travel, right? So very important to remember. And for those of you sitting in the back, he is not the fastest character in Marvel Strike Force. I don't know why. Alias is the Quick. Typically, he's Quicksilver or Pietro. Those are the two things you namely hear him referred to as, but also he went by the Quick for a short run. Affiliations. So, Quicksilver's been, like most characters pre-70s, they've been in many different team-ups. Most notably, Avengers, X-Factor, and Brotherhood, and there's a little bit debate on whether or not he was part of the Inhumans. He worked with them, but, they were sort of at peacetime when he was with them, so he didn't do anything with them. We'll talk a little bit about his relationship with the Inhumans, but yeah, you really can't give him the tag, I guess. But I think it's important to note because for anyone that knows anything about comic books, Inhumans and mutants don't vibe necessarily. And there's obviously, when you talk about Quicksilver, you have to talk about mutants. Yes. Who died? His childhood. He and his twin sister Wanda. For those of you fans out there, good old Scarlet Witch being his twin sister, were kidnapped from their home kidnapped from their home as children, and they were kind of taken, and in their head they were trained by the High Evolutionary. They were experimented on, and they don't remember that or whatever. Retcons make if you want to learn anything about Scarlet Witch or Quicksilver, retcons make things very difficult, right? So they are victim to retcon, right? So anyway, ultimately, he didn't have a childhood. He did have a childhood, and then they end up getting returned to their parents, and then they kind of start going hungry, and things start going south, and him and Wanda essentially have to run around stealing things to survive, and kind of work their way. They survive until they're found by Magneto. Background. So they went from, they're from Serbia. In the MCU, they are from Sokovia. So this is quite a different thing. But in the Marvel canon, they're from Serbia, and they are kidnapped to Wundagore Mountain, which is the base, which is the Earth base for the High Evolutionary. The High Evolutionary being more or less a big bad. If I did a Frosty feature over him, because we do power level at the end, he actually ranges, the way I wrote it on my notes is he ranges from Greg to God. So those of you in the know, you in the know. So he's either completely worthless or extraordinarily powerful. It's actually kind of RNG. He essentially is a being that he takes entire populations of people, and he forces them to advance, whether they want to or not. So he has good qualities about him, but for the most part, he's a really bad dude, right? So he kidnaps the twins, and it is revealed way later in a retcon, that he experimented on them as kids, right? His speed. So something I want to talk about Quicksilver's speed. When you think of speedsters in Marvel, you think of Quicksilver. When you think of speedsters in DC, you think of the Flash, right? And I want to point out, these two are not equivalent whatsoever. Obviously, their character builds are sort of similar. I just wanted to point out speed. So Quicksilver's speed isn't quite as fast as you would think, whereas Flash's is. So Flash has this sort of infinite component to him where he can kind of keep going, and compared to light. Flash is compared to light. Quicksilver's compared to sound. So he's substantially slower than Flash. So his best feat is being able to clear half the world in like 0.95 seconds, which isn't even close to the speed of Flash. And I just want to throw it out there. I am a big Marvel person. I predominantly am in Marvel. I enjoy DC, but I also know something about DC. And I know that there's this fun thing about like debating who's better, but Flash is significantly faster. Quicksilver to me is a more interesting character, but I just want to throw out there, he actually, as far as in all of comics, not just Marvel or DC, in all of comics as a speedster, he's not really that high, which is kind of crazy. But Shark, I'm gonna talk about Bova. I'm actually gonna talk about Bova. Thank you, Shark. Anyway, so his speed. The Mystic tag. Okay. Alright. So, with every other character in Marvel Strike Force or Marvel in general, if they are experimented upon in this game and others, they are typically referred to as bio. They have some sort of bio background, and due to how the High Evolutionary, he is not using magic to change people, he's using tech, right? He has this, like, it's like an evolution drive, and which pushes people forward, like, to the next level or whatever. He keeps it in his suit, and he's got some other versions of it, right? It doesn't actually make sense that he's Mystic for that reason. This is my attempt to correct Scopely. I don't know. If you want to give Quicksilver the Mystic tag, the correct way to do it is not through the High Evolutionary like they tried to do. It is going with the MCU basis like they do pretty much for every other character. But in the MCU, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch get their powers from the Tesseract, right? Which is a Mystic base. It's an Infinity Gem. It's an Infinity Stone. I can't remember which one it is. They're gems and stones. One's in the comics and one's in the MCU. But Infinity Gem, he gets his power from that. That's how he could be Mystic. But for some reason, they said it was the High Evolutionary, and that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So anyway, there it is. Moving forward. Relationships, Natalia and Django Maximoff, mother and adopted father. So we're assumed through most of comic book history, once again, we get caught up in retcons. So from the beginning, their parents are Natalia Maximoff and a Django Maximoff. First retcon comes, Django is the adopted father and Magneto's the father, right? And then second retcon comes, and there may be retcons in between here. I'm taking bold strokes here. There's a lot of history. He's been around for a while. But second retcon comes, and so the first retcon actually comes from Bova, which I might talk about that in a second, so I'm not going to go for it right now. But ultimately, Bova relays that, hey, Magneto's your father, and then the second retcon comes from the High Evolutionary himself, and the High Evolutionary is like, nah, he's not your father. There it is. Wanda Max, and then second retcon, Django is actually their father, which is where we see Quicksilver's middle name coming from. Wanda Maximoff, his sister, Scarlet Witch, that's pretty well known and whatever. Crystalia Amicalin, it's Crystal from the Inhumans. That's his ex-wife. I'm not a very big, like, I guess I am. I don't follow the relationship drama as close as I follow some of the other stuff in Marvel, but one of the most interesting ones, in my opinion, there's a love triangle between Quicksilver, Crystal, and the Black Knight, who is a cool skill character we could have in the Marvel Strike Force, but we do not currently. And then there's Luna Maximoff, who is Crystal and Quicksilver's daughter, who is a character that really, I feel like, when you see a lot of these like really high profile characters like Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and things like that, their kids usually kind of come to the forefront, but Luna really doesn't. And she has a really interesting powers and stuff, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. But an interesting character that could be, and one of the interesting things about her got retconned out, so that's the thing. You gotta watch them retcons, baby. You gotta watch them retcons. Notable events, a Disney story. Sort of. Okay, so let's talk about a love triangle. This is gonna go on for a minute. The Inhumans and the mutants hate each other, right? So when we first find out, or we're first informed by Bova that hold on, let me tell this in the order I have it in my notes. Ultimately, Inhumans don't vibe with mutants. Here's why. They're pretty much, if from an outside viewer, from somebody who doesn't read a lot of comics and you just look at them, they're pretty much the same, right? Inhumans and mutants seem like kind of the same thing. Inhumans are a race that, they breed, and they have these things called Terrigen crystals that create the Terrigen mist, and these can give Inhumans powers, or they can ultimately, the Inhumans either inherently have their powers, or they gain them from the Terrigen mists, and they become mutated. They get a mutate, which opens their powers, and they believe that the Terrigen mists reveal a person's true self, right? And then a mutant is born with this mutant gene and slowly gets it. All this to say, Terrigen mists for Inhumans, for the most part, not always, are a good thing. They can mutate and kill people, and there's a whole thing with that, but they like the Terrigen mists. Mutants, when exposed to Terrigen mists, typically die, right? Or they get horribly, horribly, horribly sick, right? Mutants really hate the Terrigen mists, right? So they are similar enough, but when the mists are introduced, then there becomes really, really big conflict. So there's a big war in the comic books that's X-Men versus Inhumans. So at any point they don't jive, but they straight up fight wars, because there was a point where it seemed like the Earth was going to get covered in the Terrigen mist. The Inhumans were like, yeah, everyone's going to get revealed as who they are. Like, this is a good thing. And the mutants are like, we're all going to die. Oh my gosh. And then they fight. Read that. It's cool. Anyway, with that, I just wanted you to have that background because of what I'm about to say. So, due to the retcon number 1, Magneto runs into Bova. Bova is the first creation by the High Evolutionary. So, the High Evolutionary, he likes to push forward races, and he likes to create new ones, right? So his first creation, supposedly, we're assumed it's the first creation, is Bova, who is this, like, cow caregiver or whatever. And so Bova supposedly delivered Wanda and Pietro, which we say supposedly. There's a comic book still of it, but it's supposedly because, boy, that could be retconned today or yesterday, and I don't know it, right? Anyway, so, in all of this, Magneto finds Bova, and Bova's like, yeah, you're the father to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and Magneto's like, I'm gonna find him. All while, there's a big fight with, like, the X-Men and Sentinels, and Quicksilver gets really injured, and Crystal happens to be the one that is there and saves him. So Crystal saves, Pietro, but takes him to the moon, because that's where the Inhumans are, and, she's trying to nurse him back to health. In this time, he had no way to contact the X-Men, right? So he's hurt, and they spend months together, and she's healing him, and as the Disney story goes, they slowly fall. It's sort of like a reversed Beauty and the Beast situation, where Beauty has captured the Beast, sort of, and he's not held there by force, but his own injuries. But they fall in love, and it's a whole thing, and they decide to get married, and then the Avengers and Fantastic Four come and watch the marriage, and it's the whole thing. The X-Men aren't there. I wonder why. Oh, it's because the mutants hate Inhumans. That probably wasn't canon yet. But anyway, so they end up having a kid. And at the time, this was a really big deal because you couldn't mix Inhuman and mutant DNA. So she was supposed to be the first one. Her name's Luna Maximoff. She has pretty neat powers. She has this aura vision thing, so she can see auras and feelings. So she's like a high-end empath. And what she could do is she could grab the auras and mix them around to change how people's feelings, or to cure, like, she can do things like it cure insanity and stuff, which is really good for the Maximoff family, because they have a very bad, for anybody who's read a comic book, they have very bad tendency to be either depressive or absolutely and utterly nutso, like Scarlet Witch likes to go. House of M. So anyway, they have Luna, and yes, they have Luna, and it's a thing. Quicksilver, and this sort of translates to him being a father, him being, a brother, him being a dad. He's very arrogant, and he's got more or less tunnel vision, which kind of comes with being a speedster, as far as I can tell. They're either like mega ADHD, or they're, which kind of still works, but ultimately he has trouble paying attention to his loved ones, right? So due to his more or less lack of attention, is the justification given in the comics, Crystal ends up getting in an affair with the Black Knight, Dane Whitman, and it's a whole thing, and he's not super happy about that. But in the same time that they get into this thing, Maximus, who is Crystal's cousin, he is a mind control type dude, very hard, has influenced Quicksilver to react, as a person who would already react poorly, react even worse, and Quicksilver becomes a villain again, and he goes and he frames the Avengers for treason, and it's a whole, he kind of starts all these wars and stuff like that, and then eventually Maximus loses his grip on him, and then after that's kind of acknowledged, Black Bolt kind of passes it down. Black Bolt being the leader of the Inhumans, Black Bolt passes along, and he's like, hey, you need to get back. You need to get back with Crystal. Like, that's kind of your thing. And Quicksilver is like, you're not the boss of me. I'm going to X Factor. So he starts running around with X Factor. But he still loves Crystal, and that's important, right? So he tries to make it a point to kind of regain his own senses and go back to Crystal. And ultimately, he hears that the Black Knight has left the 616. He has went to a different universe, and whatever, and he goes back to Crystal, and they're back together for a little while, and they both join the Avengers, and they're working with them for a while. And then there's a situation where then we get Onslaught, right? Everybody likes to talk about Onslaught in reference to like a big bad that'd be cool to see in the MSF. Onslaught comes around, everybody thinks Crystal's dead, but turns out they just go to a different version of Earth. As most dead people do in comics, they just end up somewhere else. And when everybody returns, Black Knight returns with them, and Quicksilver and Crystal decide to break it up because she's in love with both Quicksilver and Black Knight, and he does not want to have to compete for her affection. So to this day, they are no longer shipped, y'all. So it's a thing. So they end up getting a divorce due to the love triangle, which kind of leads to everything after. And the next thing we have is I wrote it down as the Unity retcon. It's the Avengers Unity division. But ultimately what we have here is Wanda, because of the death of her children, which I think all of us are familiar with a little bit, but due to the death of her children in the comics, she goes nuts, and she goes House of M and kills all the mutants and all this stuff. But after that, she struggles with her mental health heavily. Even after she recovers, she kind of goes back and forth. She battles with insanity constantly. And there is another point where she is battling with insanity, and Magneto, so once again, in canon at this time, Magneto was still, they still believed Magneto was their father. And Magneto was the one originally that rescued them from their running around as orphans or whatever in Serbia. And he took them into the Brotherhood, and they worked with the Brotherhood for a while until they could escape. And then they find out from Bova that that's supposed to be their dad. And so then they're trying to reconcile and try to figure it out. So they go back and forth on that relationship quite often. So in this instance, Wanda is, doing mass murdery things, and Magneto and Quicksilver are like, okay, well, family, we got to do this. And so they go to try to take out, to stop Scarlet Witch, and Scarlet Witch is like, I made a spell where anybody who shares my bloodline, it will be screwed over, so here's the spell. And then Quicksilver's like, oh dang, I'm screwed over. But Magneto's like, I'm not screwed over, I can stop Scarlet Witch. And then he stops Scarlet Witch, and then all of a sudden they're like, but maybe Mags isn't our daddy, right? This is the best way I felt I could possibly tell this story. So she's like, maybe Mags is not our daddy. And so then Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch go back to Wundagore Mountain, High Evolutionary's base, to find out, because remember that's where we found out from Bova, all that stuff. So they go there, they end up in Counter Earth. Counter Earth is the kind of anti-Earth that High Evolutionary sort of operates, and that's where he experiments on his new men, his new races and stuff when he's in Earth. Anyway, so they end up in Counter Earth, and they fight this chick named Luminous, who is a being that the High Evolutionary has made that encompasses both Scarlet Witch's and Quicksilver's powers, which you can only imagine is super freaking crazy, because Scarlet Witch is insanely powerful and Quicksilver's nothing to sniff at, kids. So anyway, she more or less beats the crap out of him, Luminous, and takes them to the High Evolutionary, and High Evolutionary then reveals to them, Magneto's not your father, you're not mutants, you've just been hiding my mutations I gave you as mutants, but actually you're just mutated humans. And there it is. And so they escape, and they're like, well, our lives have been shocked again, like every other arc we're in. Oh no. And then they run into the Avengers, and then they turn around and they're like, well, let's kick the crap out of the High Evolutionary anyway. And they do. The end. That's where we're currently at as far as retcons and stuff. So, there it is. So, moving on. Marvel Strike Force doesn't care about power levels, but Hero Frosty features, I do. So, the way this works, if you are at a multiversal level, you are a threat to the multiverse as it stands. You will not just end your reality, but all other realities, right? Universal is that step down. You will end your reality, maybe hop over to another one like Black Knight did earlier in this feature, hoink, and end that one, and maybe could do that over time, right? Cosmic means you are a threat on a planetary scale. You could take out small planetary bodies up to large, or hop around and maybe end some solar system / galaxy kind of type situations. Nuclear means you are strong enough to the point of a nuclear bomb. You could take out small cities up to a planetary body with enough force. Super soldier means that you are beyond human capability. You are human plus. I say that. Typically we find that the super soldier is considered peak human potential, but there are no humans that reach that peak potential in canon, right? Other than, lifting up to upwards of tons and things like that. Other than the people that are considered super soldiers. So, super soldier. City means that you are strong enough maybe to take out a brick wall, and with enough, that's super soldier. Brick wall, enough force, a building. City means you are at peak level for human, the human ability. In Marvel, we've got a lot of secret agents, a lot of spies, and things like that. This is typically where they end up. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that Hela spawns in Marvel Strike Force, and Due to his decaying Asgardian physiology, he is weaker than our typical Asgardian, but still probably stronger than a human. But for the sake of argument, we're going to put Greg at regular old human levels. So in the event that I had a rubber band ball at the end of a chain and a lot of anger, I could probably theoretically beat Greg in a fight, right? Yeah. So in the case of
Quicksilver,
what we are looking at, he is fast. There's advantages to come from being so fast, okay? So with Quicksilver, he has similar aspects to the Flash in DC, right? So the Flash can quantum tunnel. Quicksilver can also do things like this, right? Even though his speed doesn't, the speed that we're given isn't quite equal to that. But what Quicksilver can do, he can move fast enough to alter the atomic structure of certain things. So, and due to that, he can make explosions come from the things he cuts. So he is actually working on a nuclear fission level. So my argument for Quicksilver is that he is actually at the lowest end of nuclear level possible, because he is actually making nuclear reactions as he moves through things. Quicksilver is very powerful as a character. 100%. And, you know, in Marvel Strike Force, they did the decency to make it pretty good. So Quicksilver, nuclear. That's what we're saying. According to Scopely, they didn't say anything. I pulled the one thing they said out of their video. So there wasn't any background for me to go off of up until this point, but he's in the game now. It's too late. If they give it now, it's a thing. But if they give it, let me know what it is in the comments. But that is Frosty Features Quicksilver. I hope you all had a good time. There's a lot that I wasn't able to cover because Quicksilver has been around forever and he's been in everything. So let me know in the comments your favorite Quicksilver things that I missed or things that I might have gotten wrong, y'all. I'm not perfect. It happens. Also, as a reminder, I stream at the link above every Sunday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. We do Frosty Features live. Come hang out with us. It's a good time. Give me a follow. I would really appreciate it. Also, this is here on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. Super easy, y'all. I hope that y'all enjoyed this feature, and I hope that you all have a fantastic week, and most importantly, y'all, stay cool.